He was just a kid in a wheelchair when two fake HOA cops slammed into him and broke his leg for running a red light. But before they could get away, his 72-year-old grandma stepped outside and, without touching them, made them shake in fear. What happened next left millions speechless. But let's start from the beginning. Willow Glen was the kind of neighborhood that made you believe in safety, tree-lined sidewalks, American flags on porches, front lawns kept neat, like they were still inspected by post-war veterans. Saturdays were sacred, grills sizzling in the background, sprinklers ticking over green grass, and kids chalking up the pavement like it was their canvas. 13-year-old Dylan Harlow loved those Saturdays. Born with muscular dystrophy, he had limited use of his legs, but never let it define him. His electric wheelchair, a sleek black model with a tiny horn and dinosaur stickers, gave him the speed and freedom he craved. And that afternoon, with the wind in his face and a root beer bottle in his cup holder, Dylan felt unstoppable. He zipped past the Peterson's mailbox, waved to old Mr. Winslow watering petunias, and took the corner near Brookstone Drive. The intersection without a stoplight, just a faded crosswalk, barely visible. No cars, no noise, just the buzz of his chairs, motor, and bird somewhere in the trees. Then came the engine. Low growl. Aggressive. Wrong. A black Dodge Durango, with tinted windows and no plates jumped the curb and screeched to a halt in front of him. Two men stepped out fast, not with concern, with purpose. They wore dark blue uniforms, clean-pressed, almost official-looking, except for the giant patches that read HOA Enforcement Division in white block letters. No name, tags, no badges, just mirrored sunglasses, military boots, and that cop-like swagger that screamed authority, the kind built on intimidation, not law. Dylan's chair slowed. Stop right there, the taller man barked. He looked ex-military, close-cropped hair, squared shoulders, maybe early 40s. The other one, bald and heavier, moved like he'd been looking for a fight all day. You just ran a red light, kid, the bald one added, stepping closer. There's no light here, Dylan said, confused but polite. The way his mom taught him. That's what they all say, the tall one growled. You're endangering the neighborhood. These sidewalks are under HOA regulation. But he didn't finish. The bald man grabbed the back of Dylan's wheelchair and yanked it hard, nearly tipping it. Dylan screamed, gripping the armrests as the front wheels jerked sideways and skidded across the pavement. Then came the kick. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a bump. It was a full steel toe, boot directly into the side of the wheelchair's frame and into Dylan's leg, which had been resting against it. Crack! The sound echoed. For a split second, there was silence, as if even the birds froze. Then Dylan screamed, a high, guttural, uncontrollable sound of agony. Windows on the block trembled. One or two curtains twitched, but no one came out. Yet, no one knew what to do, except for one person, Marie Harlow, from the window of her single-story ranch house just 20 feet away. Dylan's grandmother saw everything. She didn't move at first. She didn't even gasp. She just stared, watching the two men, watching her grandson fold into himself, clutching at his leg, tears running down his face as the men barked something about citations and noncompliance. Marie had spent 23 years ringside as one of the UFC's most respected cutwomen. She'd treated swollen eyes, reset dislocated shoulders, and stopped more arterial bleeding than the average ER doctor. She knew pain. She knew trauma. But most of all, she knew control. And what she saw now wasn't control. It was cowardice, dressed in authority. She stood slowly, set her tea down, and opened the drawer beside her recliner. Inside, her old gym bag, still packed, just in case. She grabbed it, slung it over her shoulder, and walked toward the front door. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She just opened the door and stepped out. Across. Hello friends, if you're new here, then don't forget to hit subscribe button. And if you like, then hit the like button also. And don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're from watching this video. The street. Dylan's vision blurred through tears. His hands trembled as he tried to reach the joystick on his chair. It wouldn't respond. The wheel was jammed, bent just like his leg. The pain was white-hot now, pulsing like electricity. The bald man leaned in again. You're lucky we don't impound this thing. Maybe next time, you'll learn to obey the signs. I didn't do anything. Dylan sobbed. Excuse me, came a voice. Calm, flat, but unmistakably sharp. Both men turned. There stood Marie, 72 years old, in a dark gray tracksuit and orthopedic sneakers. Her silver hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, one hand holding a cold pack, the other gripping a thin, polished wooden cane, not because she needed it, but because it made a better point. When used right, you boys just broke my grandson's leg, she said. We're operating under HOA protocol, ma'am, the tall one said quickly. This is official business. No, she said. This is assault. The bald man rolled his eyes. Back inside, lady. Marie didn't blink. You ever hear the phrase submandibular artery? They stared at her, confused. I have. You sever it. A man bleeds out in 90 seconds. I've stopped it over and over, but I've never started it intentionally. Not yet. Her voice was even. Her eyes never wavered, but there was something behind them. Not threat, but history. Something that said, I don't need to touch you too. And this. And suddenly, both men took a step back. Dylan, still crying, looked up at her. Grandma. Marie didn't answer. She just shifted the ice pack to her left hand and smiled. The atmosphere changed the moment Marie took that first step off her porch. It wasn't just her presence. It was the way she moved. Slow, deliberate, as if every footfall came with a promise. The two men in fake uniforms weren't used to hesitation. From others maybe, but not from themselves. Yet now, something in the air fell off. Marie walked with a cane, yes, but not because her body had failed. That cane had been custom-made after her second hip surgery, reinforced with steel. Inside the shaft, UFC fighters knew it as the thing she'd slam against the mat when they refused to quit. The sound alone made them blink. It wasn't just a support tool. It was punctuation. The tall enforcer adjusted his belt. Ma'am, we're dealing with a violation here. Please, return to your home. Marie kept walking. She was close enough now to see Dylan's fingers trembling as they gripped the chair's dead joystick. Blood was starting to seep through his jeans, right at the shin. His face had gone pale, lips trembling. And yet those eyes, they still looked to her, not just for comfort, for rescue. Marie exhaled slowly, then looked at the bald one. You kicked him, she said, with full weight. You broke a 13-year-old's leg over a non-existent stoplight. The bald man gave a mocking laugh. We were enforcing safety protocol. He resisted. Marie tilted her head. He resisted. In a wheelchair. Silence. She took another step forward. Now she stood less than 4 feet from them. The tall one was trying to reassert authority. He held up his clipboard like a badge. This area is under temporary administrative oversight, HOA emergency traffic initiative. Stop, Marie said calmly. There is no HOA here. Willow Glen dissolved its private association 2 years ago after a class action lawsuit. You boys are either incredibly stupid or incredibly desperate. The bald man's jaw twitched. Lady, one more word in. And what? She said without raising her voice. You'll try to hurt me too? You picked the wrong block. The wrong kid. The wrong family. The tall one stepped forward, tension rising. Listen, if you don't step back, we'll have to detain you for interference. Marie leaned slightly on her cane. Go ahead, but you might want to check the bones in your own face first, because they'll be the ones needing interference when this gets recorded. As if on cue, the hum of the phone camera rose nearby. Mr. Winslow across the street was recording. So was the kid on a skateboard, frozen in place with his phone halfway in the air, and the single mom next door, holding a grocery bag in one hand and filming with the other. The fake cops froze. Their bluff had been public now. It was being preserved. You think you can intimidate people just because you wear navy blue and carry clipboards? Marie said, I spent 23 years watching men twice your size get turned into puddles. You think I don't know the difference between pain and theater? The bald one took a breath, trying to laugh it off, but his fingers twitched. His shoulders weren't squared anymore. You boys don't have the stomach for this kind of power, Marie continued. You're not trained. You're not authorized. You're not men. You're costume cowards with a fantasy of control. And now you're about to be famous for it. Then she lowered her voice just enough for them to lean in slightly. Would you like me to describe in detail the way adrenaline affects your decision-making when your carotid artery is pressed? Or how quickly a radial fracture can incapacitate a dominant arm in under 6 pounds of torque? The bald one stepped back again. I didn't touch you, she whispered, but I could have. He looked at the tall one. The illusion was cracking. Dylan, still in pain, spoke between clenched teeth. Grandma, they're scared of you. She didn't look at him, just gave a tiny smile. Good. The moment hung in the air. Then the bald man did the one thing that made everything worse. He reached for Dylan. Again, Marie's cane shot forward. Not into his body, not into his face, but directly between his hands and Dylan's chair. The sound it made as it struck the pavement, a hard, deliberate clack, echoed like a gunshot. Everyone flinched. You take one more step, she said, and you'll spend the rest of your life chewing your food through a straw. That's not a threat. That's a forecast. The bald man froze. A single drop of sweat traced down his cheek. By now, sirens were audible in the distance. Not the dramatic kind from TV. The low, inevitable whine of real authority. Closing in. Marie didn't smile. She just turned, her head slightly toward the sound. Tick-tock, she said. The tall one looked at his partner. We should go. But the bald one was shaking now. Not visibly, not in fear exactly, but in uncertainty. Everything had spiraled. What was supposed to be a 5-minute scare tactic had turned into a recorded, potentially felony-level disaster. He dropped the clipboard. Dylan nodded, weakly, and then, for the first time since the encounter began, Marie stepped between the fake cops and her grandson. It was the most human act of all. A grandmother standing guard. No weapons, no violence, just presence, history and authority that didn't need a badge. The men didn't move again. They couldn't, because for all their size and gear and puffed-up egos, they had been outmatched by someone who didn't even raise her voice, just her presence. And in that silence, the sirens got louder. The sirens grew louder. They weren't rushing. They were arriving. With purpose. Like lions approaching carrion. And in that moment, the two fake HOA enforcers realized they were no longer in control. The scene had shifted from confrontation to exposure. Marie stood calmly between them, and Dylan, her cane planted like a flag. Behind her, more neighbors had stepped out. One elderly man in slippers. A teenage girl with earbuds dangling from her neck. Even the Petersons, usually silent, stood with arms crossed, phones out recording. The tall enforcer fidgeted, trying to retrieve whatever composure he had left. We didn't mean for this to escalate, he muttered, almost to himself, but it was too late for that. His clipboard lay on the ground, the flimsy mask of authority cracked wide open. And now blue lights flashed at the end of the block. 2 patrol cars rolled up. Slowly. No screeching tires. No over-the-top Hollywood drama. Just quiet. Professional arrival. The kind that said, "We've already seen the footage." Officers stepped out. 1 male, 1 female, both in regulation uniforms. Calm, but alert. Marie stepped aside. "He's the victim," she said, nodding at Dylan, who was still clutching his leg in the broken wheelchair. "They're the suspects. And I suggest someone get my grandson an ambulance before I start sewing stitches where they don't belong." The female officer knelt next to Dylan immediately, her tone soft but efficient. "Hey there, buddy. Stay with me, okay? Help's just around the corner. Can you tell me your name?" "Dylan," he gasped. "My leg, it hurts bad." "I know, sweetheart. We've got you." The male officer turned to the 2 HOA men. "Identification," he said. The bald man opened his mouth to argue, but the look in the officer's eyes shut it immediately. "We're with HOA enforcement." "There is no HOA enforcement authority in this district," the officer cut in. "You are not recognized by the county. You're not even registered security. Now I won't ask again." They hesitated, then reluctantly, the tall one pulled a worn wallet from his back pocket. Inside wasn't a badge. It was a laminate card labeled Neighborhood Compliance Volunteer, printed on what looked like a home printer. The officer didn't even look surprised. "Thought so." He looked over at Marie. "You detained them?" "I advised them to stay put," she replied. "And I believe my cane did most of the persuading." The officer smirked just slightly and nodded. "Effective technique. Been doing this longer than you've had a badge," she muttered. Backup arrived within minutes. 2 more units along with EMTs. As the paramedics gently lifted Dylan onto a stretcher, the growing crowd murmured with quiet rage. "I saw the whole thing," said Mr. Winslow. "They slammed into that boy for nothing. They broke his leg and called it compliance," added another neighbor. "That's assault." "They tried to intimidate her too," said the teenage girl. But she shut them down. Phones kept recording. One woman had already gone live on Facebook. "Y'all, look what's happening on Brookstone Drive. Fake cops broke a disabled kid's leg and got owned by his grandma. Look at this woman. She's a boss." The bald fake cop's face was drenched in sweat now, his hands trembling slightly. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone," he mumbled, half to the ground. "You kicked a wheelchair," one officer replied flatly. "Explain that to the DA." The 2 men were handcuffed slowly, deliberately, not because they resisted, but because it mattered. The audience needed to see it, justice in motion. As they were led to the patrol cars, the bald one glanced over at Marie as if searching for mercy. But Marie just raised one eyebrow. "You should have walked away when I offered you the out," she said. "Now you get the full story." "Full story?" the officer asked. Marie nodded toward the growing group of neighbors. "There's video, multiple angles. I also made a few calls. One of my old fighters, Nick Barron, he's a homicide detective now, told me HOA impersonation cases are popping up statewide. Might be connected." The officer blinked. "You're that Marie Harlow?" She gave a modest shrug. "I was. Now I'm mostly just a grandmother with a wicked sense of timing." The tall officer chuckled. "Well, Miss Harlow, you may have just cracked a bigger case than you know." Dylan, now in the back of the ambulance, gave her a thumbs up through the open door. His face still contorted from pain, but his eyes were lit with something else: pride, relief. Marie walked over, leaned in, and kissed his forehead. "You were brave," she said. "You were scary," Dylan whispered back. She smiled. "That's the idea." As the ambulance drove off, sirens quiet now, the street finally seemed to exhale. But the moment wasn't over. One of the officers turned to Marie. "You do realize your takedown just became the talk of this county, right? The video's already on Twitter. Someone put it on Reddit too." Marie raised a brow. "Is that a good thing?" "Is if you like going viral," he said. "You just made a national example out of HOA vigilantes." She adjusted the strap on her gym bag. "Good. Maybe next time they'll think twice before targeting a kid in a wheelchair." Then, as she turned back toward her house, a voice from the crowd shouted, "You're a hero." Marie paused, looked over her shoulder. "No," she said. I'm a grandmother. The story didn't end on Brookstone Drive. In many ways, it only began. By that evening, the video had already racked up over 300,000 views. It had everything the internet loved: a vulnerable victim, corrupt authority figures, and an unexpected hero with nerves of steel and a sharp tongue. But it wasn't just entertainment. It was evidence, and when Marie Harlow went to sleep that night, she had already given 3 interviews: local news, a podcaster with a criminal justice series, and a veteran MMA commentator who couldn't believe the cutwoman from Vegas just made a comeback in suburbia. Meanwhile, Dylan lay in a hospital bed, leg in a cast, head resting on a pillow, surrounded by dinosaur plushies. The doctors confirmed it was a clean break, painful but treatable. What stunned them more was the outpouring of attention. Teachers sent cards. Classmates sent memes to cheer him up. A local motorcycle club organized a fundraiser for a brand new reinforced wheelchair, custom painted with flame decals, shocks, and voice-controlled LEDs. But the biggest shock came 48 hours later. Police investigators had followed up on Marie's tip, the connection to other cases involving fake HOA enforcers. What they found was a coordinated operation. A group of men, mostly ex-security guards and failed bounty hunters, impersonating authority figures across multiple neighborhoods. Their scam was simple: wear convincing uniforms, make residents feel guilty or intimidated, issue fake citations, then collect payments on the spot or send follow-up invoices that looked official. Many elderly homeowners, confused or scared, had paid up. Some even allowed these men into their homes, unknowingly giving criminals full access to their private lives. But thanks to the video from Brookstone Drive and Marie's televised breakdown of their fake authority symbols, the whole operation collapsed. Within a week, 5 more arrests followed. The ringleader, a man named Carson Royce, previously discharged from private security for aggression, was found hiding out in an RV outside Bakersfield. Turns out, he'd been selling fake compliance permits online for months. Marie was called in to testify. In the courtroom, dressed in a dark suit with her silver ponytail neat as ever, she stood with a calm fierceness that silenced even the judge. The prosecuting attorney didn't need to do much. The jury had seen the video. They'd seen the blood on Dylan's pant leg. They'd seen Marie step between 2 grown men and dismantle their confidence with nothing but posture and precision. The conviction was unanimous. All suspects were sentenced, with Carson receiving the harshest penalty: 7 years for organized fraud, assault on a minor, impersonating a public officer, and attempting to obstruct justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Marie. Cameras flashed. Mics were shoved toward her. "Do you consider yourself a vigilante?" one asked. "No," Marie replied. "I consider myself a grandmother. And grandmothers don't let cowards lay hands on their babies." The clip aired on every major outlet that night. Even Good Morning America ran a segment, Grandma versus Fake Cops, the viral showdown that sparked a statewide crackdown. Back in Willow Glen, things slowly returned to normal. The neighbors, once private and wary, now waved a little more. People knocked on Marie's door just to say thank you. Local teenagers whispered, "That's her," when she walked by the park. Someone even left a bouquet of roses on her porch with a card that read, "For the woman who made them bleed without lifting a hand." But the most meaningful tribute wasn't flowers or likes or viral views. It was what Dylan asked for once he came home. "Grandma," he said, looking up at her from his new wheelchair, "can we go to the corner? I want to finish what I started." Marie nodded. Together they rolled, she walking beside him, he navigating with careful turns, until they reached the faded crosswalk at Brookstone Drive, the spot where it had all happened. He pulled out a piece of red chalk from his pocket, his hand still shaky. He drew a long, looping line across the sidewalk. Then slowly he traced the shape of a dinosaur, the same one he had been sketching on his notebook the day of the incident. When he finished, he looked up. "Can we keep this here?" Marie smiled. "We'll make it permanent." The next day, local artist volunteers, along with Dylan's classmates, came together to recreate. The image, this time, was painted professionally across the entire sidewalk, sealed with weatherproof coating. Below the dinosaur, in bold block letters, were the words, "Here a boy stood and didn't back down." Here a woman stood and didn't need fists to fight. Here we stand together against fear. The mural became a symbol, not just for Willow Glen, but for every neighborhood that had been preyed on by fake authority. News crews returned to film it. Tourists took photos. And Dylan, he smiled every time someone asked about it. Not because he liked the attention, but because he remembered. He remembered the pain, the fear, the shame. But he also remembered his grandmother's footsteps, her voice, her calm. And he remembered how two men with fists and threats folded like paper before someone who never even raised her hand. In the weeks that followed, state legislation was quietly proposed to increase penalties for impersonating any form of community enforcement. The bill was nicknamed the Harlow Act. Marie was invited to speak before the committee. She declined. "I've said enough," she told the official on the phone. "Besides, my grandson just started painting again, and I've got a porch swing that needs fixing." When asked if she feared retaliation or regrets, Marie answered with her usual dry confidence. "Fear? Only of running out of tea. And regret." She paused. "Only that I didn't break their spirits sooner." And so the story that started with a broken wheelchair and a boy's scream ended with community pride, national justice, and a message that echoed far beyond the suburbs. You don't need to raise your fist to make someone bleed. You just need to stand where others flinch and be willing to defend what matters. Even if you're 72, even if all you carry is a cane.